Reviewing. Okay. Hi, Kelly.
Hello, class. So today, myself, Darian, Chloe, and Vivica will be talking about smart technology and tourism. A little bit fitting that we're doing it online today, since we're talking about technology. So first, before we get started, just give a bit of an introduction about what we're going to be talking about. We're going to give some background information, just to kind of contextualize what this is and what the issue is we'll be talking about today, then give some definitions, and then get into some examples and kind of the effects that this will have on tourism. After that, we have a group activity that we probably won't be able to do. Then we'll get into our perspectives and the conclusion for the presentation.
So at this point in the semester, we are familiar with the terms neoliberalism and globalization. However, I'll just touch on the main points of tourism quickly. Neoliberalism in a tourism context focuses on commodification and marketing of a destination and subscribes to the idea that by improving economic gain and wealth, it will increase the well-being of the people. However, this ultimately creates inequalities between different communities and groups. Globalization in a tourism context is putting a spotlight on things such as information, ideas, technology, and people from an area. These, along with money, are constantly moving and being shared amongst people around the world. With this, there is global relations and different partnerships or strife between groups. And with technology, we can easily communicate and share the essence of our own locations, whether it's through Instagram or other sharing platforms. And many tourist locations want to be interconnected and put on a global view. So, developing and developed countries and tourism degrowth. The main idea of degrowth is resistance to the homogenizing effects of economic and cultural globalization, which generates places where more or less seem to look alike. There are 5 different elements of degrowth, which are reduction of working hours, environmentally friendly transportation, anti-materialism, lack of industrialization, and increased benefits for local populations. But how does this degrowth idea work with tourism? By reducing working hours, citizens have more time to travel, and with this, degrowth tourists travel more and tend to stay longer periods of time at the destinations they visit. For the environmentally friendly transportation, individuals will be encouraged to choose locations closer to home in order to travel shorter distances and stay longer. As a result, the number of domestic tourists in the country will increase. To support anti-materialism, degrowth requires us to reject the Western travel conveniences we all know and all the commodities tourism products have. These commodities are harmful for the environment and increase the waste of precious resources. Reducing industrialization and downscaling of tourism infrastructure will offer a richer experience of the local area and engagement with the host communities, and increased benefits for local populations. The degrowth tourism generates benefits for local populations as well as community participation, which will increase control over resources for groups which were previously excluded from the decision-making process. Now, we may ask, how do the elements of degrowth impact both developing and developed countries? Decreasing infrastructure in some areas may be dangerous if you're in an isolated area. Some areas that are far too large to use mode of green transportation, such as bikes, that will be an issue. Can you imagine trying to get to a national park with just your bicycle? Some developing areas rely on international travel as domestic travel isn't possible. You could look at this where you have small island tourist locations where they don't have much of a population in the area, but they get millions of people coming in. And even in the commodities and materialism aspect, that might be the main attraction. So there would be potential As an example, Edmonton might not get as much tourism because of West Edmonton Mall being shut down. Next, we're just going to touch on smart technology and tourism and the Internet of Things. Smart technology is a summary term for specific technologies and technology-driven phenomena that provide data and connectivity in ways that were not possible before. Smart tourism is strictly correlated with smart technology, whether this includes sensor technology, Wi-Fi, near field communication, smartphones, mobile connectivity, radio frequency identification, and data warehouses and data mining algorithms. The Internet of Things consists of information that is delivered across the enterprises and the network edge from the cloud and back again. And this comprises of 5 principles, which is edge to cloud, mobility, analytics, security, and collective relevance.
Okay, so tourism and the advancement of technology. So a quote that nicely summarizes the relationship between tourism and technology is from Neuhofer et al. In 2013. They say that technology has not only become an integral part of tourism, but has also revolutionized the way travel is planned, business is conducted, and tourism services and experiences are created and consumed. So in an overall sense, technology is changing tourism experiences as well as creating new ones. So for instance, we'll talk about virtual reality technology, improved translators, and convenient infrastructure. In terms of neoliberalism and globalization, we are starting to notice that within the globalized neoliberal world we live in, technological advances in tourism may either help the environment by creating more sustainable ways of travel and infrastructure, or it can continue to support neoliberal norms and profit-seeking by creating new experiences to quantify and sell, as well as providing ways to market and attract potential tourist customers at a global scale. Globalized marketing and communication. With advanced technologies, there's a constant shifting of means of marketing and communicating to tourists. Marketing is now taking place at a global scale. This means tourism operators are able to reach new potential customers, for example, from using the internet and ads and easier ways to purchase hotels, tours, etc., without even having to pick up a phone or actually talk to anybody. And this area is still continuing to improve to create ease of access and further reach of potential customers for economic gains. So essentially, tourism companies and destinations are overcoming distance and time that has previously limited advertisement in the past by using technology to reach people across the globe. In addition to this, with always improving technology comes competition, so there's a very big struggle to keep up with technological advances, and this competition is not always even, as we'll further discuss. So companies and destinations have to compete to attract tourists at now an international level in order to bring in profits, promote economic growth in destinations. And now tourism destinations and businesses essentially must keep up with each other and the technological advances in order to compete at this global scale and stand a chance in profiting as a business. Tourism operators also can and do create a global image through technological means. So a big part of this is the internet and social media. Travelers use the internet and social media to search, organize, and share their travel stories and experiences. And this is done, for example, through blogs, online communities, media sharing sites, and other communication platforms that are all based on technology and the internet. It's becoming more obvious that businesses are continuing to increasingly use social media to create a positive image of their tourism experience, shifting to the global scale in order to attract revenue. So for instance, social media is useful for managing customer relations to attract customers through engaging with them, entertaining them through opportunities to understand and respond to their preferences. In Lung et al.'s paper on social media and tourism, they state that through analyzing the comments in online communities such as TripAdvisor and Virtual Tourist, hotels and other travel-related companies are able to better understand what their guests like and dislike about them and their competitors. So tourism businesses can use this information to their advantage to market themselves as attractive destinations at a scale larger than would have been possible before significant technological advancements and the internet and social media. Neoliberal values and the negative impacts of global connectivity. Given the general neoliberal globalized world we live in, the growing use and advancement of technology and tourism can be understood as a means to attract tourists at a larger scale and increase profits. So this is kind of simple form of what is happening. In many ways, global marketing to draw in tourists for profits relates to the neoliberal ideas of commodification and that economic gains create well-being. By improving tourism marketing through technology, it is argued that increased economic profits are possible and thereby will increase well-being for the tourism destination. However, as we will discuss further in our presentation, this isn't always the case, and the advancement of technology doesn't necessarily mean improved tourism profits, and even more importantly, even if it does, this does not mean that it will benefit the general well-being of a destination, nor will all destinations benefit the same. The use of technology is also controversial in creating accessibility and increasing tourism numbers. While it's a step in the right direction to have technology available, and it can assist those with accessibility needs, whether physical, language, financial, there are arguments that the general increase in tourists means more potential environmental damages or represents too much of a central focus on neoliberal and monetary values. There's also a shift towards technology reliance that is impacting the tourism industry, as many of us have already seen. So this includes job automation. So you've probably noticed at airports, the kiosks replace a lot of workers. Virtual translators are replacing human translators, as well as other kinds of job automation. So this can be good for companies trying to reduce costs by cutting workers, but it also means negative impacts in terms of job losses and revenue going to locals of tourism destinations. Technological advances also work against degrowth in some ways. It might be argued that advancing technology in the tourism industry to attract even more guests and increase economic profits goes against the idea of imposing limits to growth and shifting away from all-out consumerism and profiteering. With all the different levels of access to technological advancements, generally, fewer individuals and businesses benefit as others struggle to keep up, which creates growing inequality.
So now that we've covered some of the basic definitions and also a lot of the implications that could come from smart tourism and smart technology, we're going to look at some specific examples of this in practice, just provide some case studies to help kind of contextualize some of the ideas we've been talking about. So there are a variety of examples from all around the globe that show the many different ways that smart technology can be applied to a destination. So you can have smart technology that can be used to gather information and data that can help inform planners on how to best design communities to handle things like tourism, and so that a city does not become too crowded. This can also make cities cleaner and greener by making them more efficient. Increased technology can make cities and destinations easier to navigate. GPS applications and apps like Trailforks can provide data on how to get around in a city or how to navigate a trail network. Smart technology can help give marketers more tools to better advertise their product in ways that are more effective. And there are entirely new ways of engaging and experiencing a tourism location that are being created through smart technology with things like virtual reality. So getting into it first, we're going to talk about destination infrastructure and how infrastructure can be made to be smart so that it can better improve the tourist experience and reduce some of the negative impacts of tourism on a destination. So one of my personal favorite examples and what I'll talk about first is pictured here. It's a garbage can. It's called the Big Belly. So it is a smart garbage can and waste management system. And basically what makes it smart is it has a sensor inside that records the volume of the garbage that's inputted into it. It also has a compactor, and the thing is entirely solar powered and self-sufficient. And it can hold up to 8 times as much garbage as a regular garbage can of the same size. And then also lets collectors know when it's full and when it needs to be emptied. So this reduces traffic from having garbage trucks because they don't have to go around as frequently. And it also means that they have to spend less time and money to actually go around and check the cans to make sure they're full. And at the same time, it reduces emissions by city vehicles. Additionally, it can be equipped as a Wi-Fi hotspot that can make it more attractive for people to be near it. It reduces littering because there's never overflowing garbage cans. And that sort of Wi-Fi hotspot can be used to provide location-specific marketing, which can then be used to promote businesses in the area immediately around the garbage can, or if it's a very popular part of the city, that sees a lot of tourism and they want to spread it out so that no place gets too crowded, they can even advertise places that are elsewhere in the city that might be a less popular destination. So going beyond garbage cans with smart infrastructure, you can basically make any part of the city connected, and it'll help to improve the city's overall efficiency. So in urban green spaces and parks and plazas and things like that, places see a lot of pedestrian traffic. There's a lot of ways that you could help to make or inform planners and inform tourists and citizens and how to best use those spaces. So you can have real-time weather monitoring that measure things like temperature, solar radiation, humidity, air quality, etc. So this can show whether or not it's going to be comfortable or safe for them to go out at that given time. It can also help with things like water management. So a lot of parks that have automated sprinkler systems, you can track and see based off of how warm it is or how humid the air is, or whether or not it's raining on a park-to-park basis, and use algorithms to manage how much water is used. So this can make healthier ecosystems in parks, as well as reduce overall water use and water maintenance. So it makes costs cheaper as well. You could also have things like motion sensor light posts that reduce electricity consumption in places that might not see a lot of traffic. What this also does is it provides a benefit of allowing for the tracking of traffic along a pathway. So you can tell the actual foot traffic volume through, say, a park or something like that. And that gives community planners more information on how popular a spot that would be, whether or not there's very few people visiting that park, or whether or not it's in the many hundreds and when the peak hours are. One of the other biggest things facing cities and tourism destinations is traffic. So there are a lot of major tourism centers that have huge issues with traffic congestion as a form of over-tourism. Barcelona is an excellent example of this. And there are a variety of ways that smart technology can be used to address this. So for example, you can have smart traffic lights in intersections that use, instead of just sensors on each individual intersection, they all communicate with each other in a larger grid pattern. So this makes it so that the communication between intersections, they'll use cameras to track how many cars are at each intersection, and they will be able to adjust how long their lights are going for to make it so it's the most efficient flow possible for everybody. And there's places are already using this. Yonge Street in Toronto, which is a fairly famous street, you might be familiar with it, already uses a similar system, and it's been effective in reducing traffic congestion there. Anyone who's driven down Victoria Street in Prince George would be aware of what can happen when you end up catching every single red light on your way down there. So another one that was particularly a big issue in Barcelona is parking. And how they've dealt with it is they've put sensors in the curbs for street side parking. And what this means is they have a limited allotted time that someone can park there before they've gone over time and they get ticketed. What this does is it means that people who are ticketing know exactly where to go to whenever someone's gone over time. So they spend less time having to check every single person's license plate. This also means that you can track in real time what parking spaces are available, and you could have a phone application that tracks when there's a spot empty. So Barcelona has that, and you can find empty parking lots. Additionally, this is something that if over-tourism was a huge issue, you could potentially make it so only locals had access to that application, so they would have less trouble finding parking in the cities they live in. So overall, smart tourism makes it, or smart technology in these centers makes them much more efficient. The infrastructure has many benefits across the board. Planners have better access to data when creating new infrastructure. Citizens can get around easier and have less congestion. And for tourists, cities will be much cleaner and seem futuristic, so they can be much more attractive to visitors in that way.
All right. If you looked at the discussion, you would have seen the pocket translators or portable translators. So travel translation devices are very useful for many people. And some of the translators on the market can translate both input and output over 50 languages. If you do a quick Google search, you can see so many websites that show like the top 10 best electronic translators and stuff like that. Um, Now you may be wondering, will electronic translators replace human translators? And I'd say probably not. Some other academics also agree by saying that automation will likely be replaced, um, and it'll replace the predictable physical work. And human language is not a predictable or any sort of predictable mannerism. How can people rely on a device that may not understand them? Uh, these devices might not understand us based on our cultural nuances, slang, and context that we use within language. It's typically misunderstood by these translation algorithms that are made within the devices, says Campbell. Human translators may be more intrusive into your life. However, language is not predictable for these machines. Automatic translations typically need to be proofread, which is very interesting. Uh, does anyone remember Google translating their French homework and then getting it wrong and your teacher gets mad at you? Or going to another country and reading a poorly translated information pamphlet. It's things like these where these automatic translators get things wrong and miss context or miss slang, miss importance. Even Wong pointed out in our discussion question the issues with the Langogo translator video. The Chinese translations were not even necessarily correct, which can be very problematic when you're looking to converse with somebody. We had a video here about the Langogo versus human translation. It was like a race, but we can't play it on here because it won't work properly with a recording. And we're not tech geniuses, even though we're talking about technology.
Okay, so virtual reality is another really good example of technological advancement impacting tourism and outdoor recreation. So just a little definition, it is the use of computer technology to create a simulated environment. It places the user inside the experience by simulating as many senses as possible, such as vision, hearing, touch, and even smell. A common example is the VR headset, as in the picture on our PowerPoint. In terms of the relationship between virtual reality and outdoor recreation, tourism, and sustainability, there is supposed to be a lower carbon footprint way of learning about the world, so you don't actually create any emissions from airplanes and other travel activities. And if attractive enough, virtual reality may reduce tourism numbers and crowding and the large environmental impacts from actual tourism. So a quote by Guttentag 2010 states that part of VR's possible utility as a preservation tool derives from its potential to create virtual experiences that tourists may accept as substitutes for real visitation to threatened sites. However, this acceptance of such substances will be determined by tourists' attitudes towards authenticity and his or her motivations or constraints. There's also often a debate about whether virtual reality creates a personalized experience or a dissociated experience. So VR may improve the experience because with technology, you can cater to the tourist interests. For example, simply changing the programming to suit certain preferences, opposed to you can't really alter an actual location. There's many reasons why you wouldn't, such as financial restrictions. However, this kind of argument that virtual reality is better has some rejects to it. Many people see it as dissociating and negatively affecting the experience because these tourists aren't actually getting the same physical benefits, full communication with other tourists and locals, or the physical exercise from actually engaging and going to these destinations. It is also argued that tourists won't get the same authentic experience of travel in places by only visiting through technology. Virtual reality also has many impacts on tourism destination communities. So tourists don't actually go to a location, which means they aren't going to be investing money into the tourism-reliant communities. Profits will go to virtual reality businesses instead of the destination where the culture and the tourism experiences are actually from and created. And if less tourists are going to certain destinations, this may mean a decreased need for building infrastructure in a certain location for tourism that may also benefit the local community as a whole. VR or virtual reality is also marketed as beneficial to accessibility needs. So it could be a substitute for individuals who experience physical restrictions to going to certain destinations or participate in outdoor recreation activities. So this could be a potential positive. It also means that tourism might become more affordable for people using virtual reality, as this technology use would cost a lot less than an actual trip, meaning more people would get to experience world destinations. So we had some questions on our PowerPoint here for discussion, but yeah, we'll obviously just skip them for now.
So we did have one group activity, which I'll just explain in brief, so you understood what we would have done if we were all together. So for this activity, we're going to do kind of a group elevator pitch thing. We thought it'd be kind of fun since it's kind of a discussion of all this technology, which usually comes from private companies and very like entrepreneurial and neoliberal. So we're going to have you guys come up with your own smart technology. It can either be something existing or something original that you've come up with. And you're going to get in groups and have 5 minutes to brainstorm about this technology and how it should be implemented into the tourism market. And then let us know in a brief, maximum 2-minute elevator pitch. It's a very long elevator ride. Why would it benefit tourism? How would it make a profit? And how could it be applied to a global market? So, yeah.
Okay, so we also wanted to talk a bit about whether technological advances are beneficial to everyone, specifically relating to developed countries versus developing countries. So there's a table on the PowerPoint. It's just important to note that this is kind of a general view on the differences. And of course, there are exceptions, and this table won't apply to all countries. But as a general finding, technology can improve profits in the tourism industry, such as through creating better marketing capacity. However, for companies and destinations that don't have the resources, funds, or capabilities to keep up with technological advances, there can be significant disadvantages. So they can't compete, and they may lose visitors to destinations using more advanced technology. Or in some ways, what we might think of as traditional tourism may be replaced or taken away from by new forms of tourism. So looking at developed countries, there's typically more opportunities in supporting infrastructure to install and use advancing technology. So there tends to be more resources and wealth in developed countries to improve one's own tourism business using technology. So this means developing country tourism operators tend to have greater chances of competing at the global scale. And this can contribute to the whole idea of the rich getting richer while the poor get poorer. In this case, this relates to the unfair advantages in adopting and keeping up with expensive and constantly advancing technology in the tourism industry, and the difference between developing countries versus the ability of tourism operators in developed countries. Looking specifically at developing countries, in comparison, there's typically less infrastructure, especially advanced and reliable infrastructure that could support newer technologies. So for instance, in developing countries, there are a range of telecommunications infrastructure problems and limitations to support technology such as Wi-Fi access. There's also general debate over whether the idea that developing countries have other priorities in improving infrastructure that relates more to the basic needs of citizens, opposed to advancing infrastructure and to accommodate technologies related to the tourism industry. So this is the idea, their priorities might need to be suited more to the actual citizens opposed to tourists coming in and supporting the technology that would attract tourists. Developing country tourism operators also tend to overcome costs involved with technological advancements. So for example, information and communication technologies are expensive for people and tourism operators to set up and use, especially if they are already financially restrained. So this can create a significant disadvantage in terms of marketing and keeping up at the global scale. There also tends to be a comparative lack of relevant knowledge and skills. Sir Canisius and Burgess 2008 state in their study on developing country tourism and the internet that before adopting the internet, some owners and managers had little or no prior experience with information communication technologies, and they needed to build capacity first to effectively use it. They also explained from their study that there are issues with the skill levels of tourism employees to use new technologies, as well as challenges for operators to gain access to skilled human resources in the workforce in order to use these technologies as an effective means to benefit their business. So these findings echo the general challenges in affording and learning how to set up and implement the use of technology, as well as finding people who know how to use the technology in developing countries compared to in developed countries.
So in conclusion, we just want to offer up some of our perspectives on all of the stuff we've talked about so far. So really, like, benefits can vary depending on the technology and how it's used and how it's implemented. So there's lots of great pieces of technology out there that have a lot of really cool implications. But in a lot of ways, it'd be really easy for them to be used just for kind of neoliberal benefits and values, and not necessarily to improve the lives of citizens, the lives of tourists, and accessibility and sustainability. And there's a lot of potential inequalities. So a lot of places might not have the pre-existing technological or physical infrastructure or energy infrastructure to implement a lot of these technologies. And it's like access to smartphones and wireless internet and some of those things have already been mentioned. And infrastructure, or what was I going to say? This could end up making a lot of developing countries less competitive in a global market if this becomes this norm in the industry. So it's something that we have to be very wary about going forward, and put in a lot of efforts to plan it so that it's sustainable, it's effective, and it addresses inequality and any developmental issues globally. Um, and yeah, so we just have to be very careful with our steps going forward. But it seems like this is the way that tourism's going. Any questions?
Thank you for joining us. This would have been our discussion questions, but we don't have anyone to discuss here with us. So you can take a look at that, and we did some references, and yeah, have a great day. Let's end this.